All right, y'all, I'm here with Danny Bedwell, who is going to be running for Mississippi Congressional District 2, right?
Congressional District 1.
District 1. I'm sorry, I thought it was 2 up there. I always get that in the Delta confused.
No, that's North Mississippi, basically from Columbus up west towards Memphis.
Okay. And we're doing this interview so that I can ask Danny a couple of questions. First off, why should I vote for you if I lived up there?
Because I don't suck as much as the other guys. That's your typical politician answer. I will tell you this, Anthony. The reason people in North Mississippi need to vote for me is because I am truly different. I want to reduce the size, scope, and role of government in every arena, at least by 80% or better. I'm going to offer something to the people of North Mississippi that they haven't heard before. I'm going to offer them limited government. And really, that's why I want to run for office.
Okay, now what do you mean by limited government? What kind of government are you wanting to limit?
I want to limit it to the Constitution. You know, our Constitution was written on 4 pieces of paper. I want to limit our federal government to 4 pieces of paper. There is no constitutional provision for the Department of Agriculture. There is no constitutional provision for the Department of Education. There's no constitutional provision for the Department of Health, etc. The Department of Homeland Security.
So basically, you want to go back to Article 1, Section 8.
Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, yes, sir. And actually, more than that, I want to restrict our judiciary to their proper role in governance as well.
And what would their proper role be as far as what you would like to restrict it to?
Well, you know, a judge, regardless of what they're teaching in our law schools these days, and regardless of what these judges, a judge is supposed to be an impartial arbiter between 2 differing parties, between 2 warring factions, if you will. They've lost that. One of the things, our war on drugs, this is not rocket science. Our war on drugs has failed. Drugs are just as readily available as they've ever been. You can get them on any street corner. They're just as cheap as they've ever been. The only thing the war on drugs has accomplished has taken good, decent people that have harmed no one and put them in jail. They got put in jail for the sole purpose, for the sole reason that they were doing something that a majority of others disapproved of.
Okay. As far as war on drugs, I think we can both agree that it has failed.
Not only has it failed,
and it's costing more money than you or I could spend in 500 lifetimes.
Well, it's nearly bankrupt our nation. But regardless of the cost of it, when you look at it through another lens, it has caused, first of all, I ask the people that support the war on drugs, that claim that they are constitutionalists, why do you suppose it took the 18th Amendment to prohibit alcohol? The answer, of course, is that there is no constitutional provision for the federal government to ban substances. None whatsoever. None. So it's nearly bankrupted our nation. You know, we're $18 trillion in debt as it is right now. But it's done something worse. It has stripped the people of their protections under the Bill of Rights. You know, the 4th Amendment says that you cannot be searched without a warrant. And the police officers in some courts will say, well, probable cause, we can search you if we have probable cause.
Last I checked, the 4th Amendment says that you have probable cause to get a warrant to search.
That's exactly right. The 4th Amendment says that if you have probable cause, now you may go get a warrant. But what our war on drugs has said is no, now if we have a wink from a well-trained dog, that's enough evidence that we can search your car without a warrant. Just a wink from a well-trained dog. The 5th Amendment says that you cannot be deprived of your life, liberty, or property without due process of law.
Going back to the 4th Amendment, this is this is just so we don't get confused here, or the viewers and listeners don't get confused here. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue, but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. So with that saying, is that you cannot just I can't walk up to you and say, hey man, I just saw you coming out of such and such house and he's a known dope dealer.
Right.
And say, put your hands on the wall, spread your legs.
Right. If you have suspicion that I've committed a crime, good. Go get a warrant. Go get a warrant and you may search me. That's what the Fourth Amendment says. It all started back from what we call the screaming door, or the scream behind a closed door. Some lawyer made the argument to the Supreme Court that what is a police officer supposed to do if he's walking down his beat in New York City and he hears a woman scream from behind a door? In order for him to kick the door in and save the day, must he go get a warrant? Well, common sense tells us no, that's not necessary. Any decent human being, whether he's a police officer or whether he's the mailman or the next door neighbor, any human being would kick the door in and go save the day.
What about Warren versus D.C., though? Police officers, and if you're a police officer watching this, I'm not against you. I thank you for your service. I just want to get that out of the way before I say what I'm going to say.
Right.
What about Warren v. D.C., which is a 1979 Supreme Court case to where two women were being raped, and the police showed up to the wrong address. They got the call again from a downstairs neighbor, I believe it was, who called the police back. They did not even respond. They just kind of took the call and went on about their day with it. These two women sued the Washington, D.C. Police Department, and it kind of started a precedent where the police now have no duty to protect you. What about, how does that play into the screaming behind the door?
Well, again, whether they have a duty to protect us or whether they're a police officer or not is irrelevant. Human beings, I, Danny Bedwell, whether I'm a police officer, a welder, a plumber, whatever my vocation in life is, it's incumbent upon me to stop a rape if I can. You don't need a title, a badge, a gun. You don't need that stuff. So to suggest that law prohibits one person from helping another, well, I'm sorry, that law is ridiculous. And I think it was Chief Justice John Marshall in Mabry versus Madison said that any law that is unjust on its face is null and void. So there you are.
Okay. What would you like to see done in Washington if your first legislative session, which if you get elected, you will be in the middle of the current session? What is one of the first acts that you're going to do when you get there, or the first act that you're going to do when you get there?
We have to stop flirting around the edges. There are some serious systemic issues wrong with our system of governance. One of the biggest is taxation. One of the most evil systems thrust upon man in the history of mankind has been something called direct taxation. The income tax is direct taxation. Direct taxation, the federal government puts their hand directly into your pocket, and there is nothing your county supervisor, your board of aldermen, your state senator, your governor, there's nothing anyone can do about it. It is direct taxation. I want to end direct taxation.
So you want to repeal the 16th Amendment?
And that's not necessary. Yeah, I would love to repeal the 16th Amendment, but the IRS and the income tax was created with a piece of legislation submitted by Congress. Congress can simply write another piece of legislation dismantling the IRS. Now, Republicans and Democrats, for the record, I want people to know that I am a libertarian. My background, I've been a libertarian candidate for the U.S. House before. But both Republicans and Democrats, they will complain about the income tax on occasion, high taxation. We want 37% tax versus 24%. they have it within their means to write legislation to repeal the income tax. Yet time after time, election cycle after election cycle, they do not do it. And one of my first acts, if I'm elected to office, I'm going to submit legislation to repeal the income tax.
Okay, now if you repeal the income tax, and I'm asking, I know how I feel about it, because I also am a libertarian, but I'm asking for the Republicans and or Democrats that may be watching, how are you going to fund government services?
Very simple. As I said at the beginning, I want to reduce the size, scope, and role of government in every arena. So we have to cut a lot of federal programs. When we do that...
Which federal programs would you be wanting to cut?
Just about every one of them. It'd be easier for me to tell you which ones I would not cut.
And which ones would you not cut?
I would probably allow for the Department of Commerce, because there is a constitutional provision for the Department of Commerce. The Department of Transportation, I would probably cut their budgets a little bit. I'm more of a federalist, which I think governance should come from the bottom up, up to the state level, and then from the state levels to the federal government. So most of the money and most of the decision-making authority for how that money is spent should be at the state legislatures. So take all of the money that the U.S. Department of Transportation has and give it back to the states. Apportion it according to how many road miles they have or automobiles or however we figure it would be best divided. But give the states their money back. Do we really need to take that money from the state of Mississippi, send it to Washington, D.C., to the Department of Transportation, where those bureaucrats will keep a little bit, for the effort. They'll keep a little bit and then give the state of Mississippi some of it back. Where is the sense of that? Okay,
so what about interstate highways that are federally funded?
That would be one area that I would probably allow. I say that cut the Federal Department of Transportation. I don't see why each state couldn't have 2 representatives. This would mean that the entire Federal Department of Transportation would have 100 employees, and those 100 employees, part of their job, 2 representatives from each state, those 2 would have to look at their interstate systems within their state and determine the budget for it. But the state legislatures, their job is to maintain those highways.
Okay.
I would also look to get rid of the Department of Health. There's no reason why we have to have a federal Department of Health. Get governance back closer to the people at the state level.
So you're talking about a complete repeal of the ACA, the Affordable Care Act.
Oh, yes, and I'm not going to replace it with anything. I want to make health care cheaper. I want to make it more accessible to everybody. The only mechanism throughout the history of mankind, the only mechanism that provides that is free market health care. Make the doctors compete for your health care dollar. Make the insurance companies compete for your health care dollar. When we do this, when we, the patients, are in charge of how we spend our money, the people that provide that service, they'll listen. They compete through customer service, price.
Okay, what about indigent patients?
When I was growing up as a kid, there was St. Anthony's Hospital, and it was a hospital run by the Catholic Church there in our town. And they took indigents in, and they provided for the health care. Of course, they looked for contributions or donations from society. They asked for money from the state government to help them pay for these indigent patients. And the system worked pretty good. It was pretty cheap. Did the state actually pay some money to this Catholic ran hospital? Maybe, but it was probably indirectly, and it was a very small amount. It's not the hundreds of billions of dollars that Obamacare or the ACA requires. So, when it comes to just about all of society's woes, I see the free market. I am a free market capitalist. The free market principles of supply and demand, they drive prices down. They force customer service. You'll find now that hospitals and doctors' offices, they advertise on television and they will compete for your money and they will promise you things. That's the way we want it. We want to be in charge of our health care, I think.
Okay. What else would you do away with or not do away with?
The main thing that I'm going to be very powerless. I will be upfront with you about that. I don't get to pass bills.
Well, I'm asking.
What I do is I can change the argument.
If you were in committee, okay, I don't know what committee. If you do replace
the budget committee is what I would want to be in.
Okay, if you were in the budget committee, all right, what would you cut budget to, or what would you fund?
I would cut everything across the board. Not completely.
Department of Defense?
Yes, I would cut the Department of Defense. You have to understand, when we talk about Department of Defense budget, there's actually two budgets. There's military spending and then there's defense spending. Military spending will be Veterans Affairs. It will be TRICARE. It will be college educations, your GI bills. It will be that stuff. Military spending, military housing. Defense spending.
Would you cut that? Would you cut the military spending?
Unfortunately, yes. And I'm not. I know that politics. I'm supposed to look right into the camera and tell every veteran out there, I will protect your benefits. The thing is, we waste so much money. I can cut 10% from the VA budget and never, ever, ever affect the benefits that the veterans are receiving.
And what's your experience with the VA?
Horrible, of course. I'm retired military. I want to go on record as saying that. I was a Navy diver for 20 years. I am, to this day, receiving a pension from the United States military, and I have TRICARE as my health care system. I do appreciate that, and my experience with the VA itself, inefficient. I'm a business owner now, and if I was the owner of that hospital, the VA hospital, I would be firing some people and be doing things different because there are some efficiencies that no business would put up with. So,
okay. What about the defense spending? What would you cut?
Oh, do you know that we still have troops in Ecuador? We still have troops in Germany. We still have troops in South Korea. We still have troops all over the place. I want to bring the troops home. We don't need to have troops everywhere. So when I say cut the budgets, I'm not talking about cutting it down to bare bones. I'm talking about making it the budget balance. And if we spend $500 billion on the Department of Defense, I bet you I can cut 50 to 75 billion out of that budget, and you'll never notice it. But this is the discipline this is the discipline that we need. The other candidates in the race, they're going to say they're going to be wiser managers of that budget. And there's no way. There is no way that we can afford this monstrosity of a government that we have. There have to be cuts made. It's time for serious talk. I'm not going to pander to you and say, oh, this is your sacred cow. If you vote for me, I promise you I will not cut it. I'm not that guy. I'm telling you right now, this is serious business, and cuts have to be made.
Okay. What laws would you be looking at repealing when you got there, other than what you've already mentioned? Is there any federal laws besides the war on drugs and or any policies that you would like to see changed that you would try to change?
I would like to change a lot of things. The assaults on our Second Amendment, and sometimes these assaults on the Second Amendment happen through good intentions, more times than not.
So what's your theory on the NFA, the National Firearms Act?
I think it's unconstitutional. I will offer what Harry Brown, longtime politician, once said, and he was on this debate panel with the NRA, Wayne LaPierre, and a couple others. I think Charleston Heston was there. And what Harry Brown said was, I disagree with all of my fellow panelists because any legislation, federal or state, that addresses some measure of gun control, even if that legislation is there to secure your right to keep and bear arms, any legislation is unconstitutional because the Second Amendment restricts the government from it. The Second Amendment says you may not pass any law, good law or bad law. You may not restrict the right of any single person to keep and bear arms.
Okay, what about civil liberties? What's your stance on those?
I believe in liberty.
The rights of, let's just say, and I know this is not a federal issue, this is more of a local and state issue, but I'm going to ask you for the record anyway.
Sure.
Homosexuals getting married,
okay, we'll go with that one.
Things of that nature. What's your stance on government's role in the private lives of its citizens in that manner?
None. You know, and I'm gonna talk about gay marriage for 1 second because we need to go on the record here. I believe in liberty, in all aspects of liberty. Financial, economic liberty of the individual. I also believe in the social or civil liberty of the individual. I am a libertarian. I believe in liberty. I've been married to the same woman for 30 years, and we were married in the eyes of God, not in the eyes of any governor, any president, any Congress, any legislature, any collection of men. We were married in the eyes of God. Back around the turn of the century, 1880s to 1920s, depending on what state you're in, governments started licensing marriage, and they started approving of marriage. For the previous 5,000 years, that was not the case. It was easy to get married, and you did not need Caesar's permission to get married. So my position is, I want to get government out of marriage completely, entirely. Heterosexual, homosexual, I don't care. Marriage is a holy sacrament between two people and their God. Government doesn't need to get in between there. So I would erect a complete wall of separation between government and marriage.
Okay. What about? I guess that answers that question. What I was fixing to ask was, what about the tax write-offs? But you said you want to get rid of the IRS,
sure.
So that takes care of that.
Sure, and that's one of the arguments that a lot of gay couples are making. Why they want the government to sanction their marriage is for the Social Security death benefit. See, a heterosexual couple can live together for 50 years, and one of them die. The survivor gets what's called the Social Security death benefit. A gay couple can live together for 50 years, one of them die, and they do not get the Social Security death benefit. Well, under my plan, they wouldn't get the death benefit anyway, nor would the Social Security or the heterosexual couple. They wouldn't get the death benefit because Social Security is an insurance plan. And if you want an insurance plan that says, should player A die, player B is the beneficiary. Permission granted, go get yourself a Social Security, an insurance plan. So we can substitute a lot of these government programs with liberty, and that's what I seek to do.
Okay. Tell a little bit about the Libertarian Party. What it's about, what it's...
Sure. I like the Libertarian Party. I think that the mechanism, the entity that is going to restore constitutional governance to this country, that's going to limit government, that entity is going to be the Libertarian Party. Now, there's a big movement on right now that says, let's take back the Republican Party. I want to know, take it back from what, or take it back to what? For the history of mankind, for the history of the Republican Party, not once.
Well, I'm trying to, I'm with you on this. I'm trying to figure out when the Republican Party has done anything in my interest. And going all the way back to 1854 when the party was formed,
Not once have they ever reduced the size, scope, and role of government. Not once have they ever repealed one of FDR's, New Deal programs.
Actually, let's go back further than FDR.
Sure.
Let's go back further than FDR. Let's go back to the war between the states.
Sure.
Which is sometimes effectively called the Civil War. As stated, both me and Danny live in Mississippi. So we did not like what the government was doing to us, and it wasn't over slavery. Let's get that straight out of the gate. It had nothing to do with slavery. We did not like the things that the government was doing to us as a state, so we decided we were going to break off the Union. The Republican president at the time, Abraham Lincoln, said no. Basically, the first act of the first Republican president in this country was to go against the Constitution and the wills of his people. And not only that, he raised an army against his people. Now, fast forward to 2001. What do we have again? We have the Department of Homeland Security in 2002 under a Republican president who again raised an army against his people.
Right, and I agree with you. And one of the big things that we have to understand, I wish the voting population understood this, the difference between nationalism and federalism. You know, federalism is 50 independent laboratories of innovation, 50 independent states figuring out the best way to do things. 50 tries at it. Nationalism is one size fits all. The national government in Washington, D.C., figured out, Common Core is a perfect example of it. The national government coming out with a program, and it's one size fits all. They throw it out to the 50 states, and the 50 states must comply. That is nationalism. One of the things that Abraham Lincoln did was he changed us from a federalist type of government into one of a nationalist type of government. And we have to change that. And I wish that the Republicans would understand the difference between nationalism and federalism and fight for federalism. And if they will do this, they will see what I'm talking about. Shutting down the Federal Department of Transportation and putting that money and the decision-making authority back to the states. That is an effort to restore federalism. So when I talk about systemic changes that have to take place within our system of government, that's what I'm talking about. But yeah, not ever in the history of mankind has the Republican Party ever decreased the size, scope, and role of government.
What about the Democrats?
Nor them. And, you know, both of those parties, they campaign on it. The Democrats promise to be wiser managers of the debt, of this monstrosity of the government. The Republicans, for generations, have promised to cut the size, scope, and role of government. I can remember when Republicans were opposed to the income tax. Now what they argue 24% versus 37%. They have accepted the income tax as part of life. The Libertarian Party does not. The Libertarian Party is the only party still dedicated, still committed to constitutional governance and reducing the size, scope, and role of the federal government. And that's why I'm a libertarian.
All right. In closing, anything you want to add as far as any arguments or rebuttals or anything that you want to add to why people should?
No. I just appreciate you letting me come on here and do this interview with me. I wanted to let people know that they can go to DannyBedwell.com. That's DannyBedwell.com. And read some of my position papers that I've written on things. There's also a little button there that says contribute. Feel free to do that. I am going to be running, there's supposedly a special election that's being planned for North Mississippi. The incumbent representative, Congressman Alan Nunnally, passed away.
God rest his soul.
It's a horrible thing. I would not wish that on anyone, and our thoughts and prayers are with his family. And but we are making plans to enter that special election. So I would love to hear from you. Send me an email at info@DannyBedwell.com. Ask me your question, and I promise you I will be truthful. We're beyond this place where we can lie to people now. We have to be truthful. So I'm not promising you I'm going to tickle your ears. I'm going to tell you the truth as I see it. So thank you very much, Anthony.
Yeah, thank you, Dan.
Thank you.